back to Happy Hour. I am Perry Goldstein, and I'm joined, as always, by my amazingly gorgeous and smart co-host. What you drinking tonight?
Oh, God. It's called OG, and it's from Milwaukee Brewing, and it is a 9.2 percenter, so it's about to go down.
We are getting after it tonight. I'm doing local as normal. Brooklyn Lager, Brooklyn Brewery. Shout out. If you're ever in New York, this is actually a must stop. It's an awesome, awesome spot. Wish I was getting paid to say that. Okay, so a lot happened in the last couple of days. I guess I wouldn't say a lot, but there's been a lot of media availability. We've got to hear from some players. If anybody missed it today, Jair had a really uniquely Jair performance with some sunglasses on. So, and we got to hear about how it's been back at Lambeau. Which sounds like everyone's really, really excited to be back together. Just getting in the locker room again. The camaraderie, the brotherhood is back. A little different, but it's back. And we also have some new faces that are going to be joining soon. Isn't that right?
We do. We promised that we were going to stop talking about wide receivers, and here we are. We're about to talk about wide receivers because the Packers brought in Malik Turner from Seattle on a free agent visit. And, Goot had kind of alluded to the fact that given the literal pandemic that we are in, bringing in a free agent all but surely means that they're interested in signing something, the player, unless something goes really wrong.
Right.
And then we have Travis Fulgam was just signed by the Packers, picked up off of waivers from the Lions. He was a 6th-round pick from the Lions last season. He's played in 3 games for them, 0 starts, had 0 receptions. But his college film is nice. It's pretty impressive.
Yeah. But Malik Turner also had 1 touchdown for the Seahawks?
Like 245 yards. He had a major drop for them in the NFC divisional game against the
Packers. Works for us. Thanks,
but his overall catch percentage is pretty legit. It's like 68%. So, it's kind of funny. They brought in 2 guys who are very Packers-y body type guys. They're I think they're both 6'2", a little over 200 pounds. Not necessarily burning speed, but really good hands, which is like the Packer way, apparently.
Yeah.
That's all we got.
Well, our speed demon was talked about a good amount by LaFleur in his press conference this past weekend. MVS got a lot of praise, actually, from Coach, just saying how much he's needed and how he hopes that his confidence has risen and that he thinks the offseason did some good things for him health-wise, because I guess he really was battling that ankle injury for the entire season, and that affected how he was feeling about himself mentally. But I like to hear that LaFleur praise him a little bit and say, when he's on the field, the defenses should be scared because of his speed. His speed and size combination, honestly, if he can put it together, is wild.
Yeah, I was just on Nagler's Never Right with Aaron Nagler, which is like the best name for a podcast outside of Pax, what she said.
It's also so true.
But we were talking about the fact that MVS and Aaron Rodgers, whatever it is about those combination of guys, have never been able to get on the same page. And honestly, a large part of it is probably because Aaron Rodgers does not know how to throw a deep ball to somebody that actually has burners. He's used to the 4.5, 4.6 guys who have game speed, but not actual speed. So when MVS can get open, it's you underthrow them or you overthrow them because they just cannot figure out some type of chemistry between the two of them.
I think they'll figure it out. I think this feels like the time. I'm feeling confident now. Honestly, after listening to Coach talk about the room, and Alan Lazard too. Lazard was like, okay, I have 2 things that I feel like were standout to me with Lazard. One is they gave him his own presser, which we're seeing that only sort of the big names are getting those, right? And so I think that says a lot to me in terms of just what they feel about him. And that's super confidence. And then he was we kind of laugh about it in the room that people don't take us seriously. And it's all right, well, we're just going to go and show you next season, and I hope they show him. Sorry.
It's interesting though. They talked about having this confidence in the guys in the room. And then, I think that we can argue, at least the first 3 are solidified. You obviously know it's Davante Adams and Alan Lazard. EQ has been talked about so much that, it feels like he's kind of that lock for the 3rd role, whether he plays in the big slot or on the boundary. But then beyond that, you think MVS is pretty clearly fourth at this point, assuming he can kind of put everything together.
Yeah.
Jake Kumero's got an outside shot. I think he would be most likely at this point to latch on as the fifth guy, given his chemistry with Rodgers. But Reggie Bentleton, Darryl Stewart, Darius Shepard coming back, and now the new players that the Packers are adding. It's just interesting, for them to talk about how much confidence they have in the room. Oh my God, Kat. Okay. You saw her ear just now.
Miranda! People are joining to see Miranda.
But you hear them talk about how much confidence they have in the room, and then they go in and bring in new guys. So do you think that a guy like Malik Turner actually has a shot at latching onto the roster, or do you think it's like we need camp bodies to push the guys in front of them?
I mean, I think it's a little bit of both, right? You never know. Like Alan Lazard, we picked up off the Jacksonville practice squad, and here he is as wide receiver 2 now. So I think it's a combination of things. I don't think competition is necessarily a bad thing. Like let's get the kind of let's go light a little fire under their ass, right? But I mean, I think at this late in the game, they're definitely at a disadvantage. I mean, all offseason, the other guys have been able to study the book and understand the scheme and talk to each other and ask questions. And so I think some of the new guys coming in just have a disadvantage from that perspective. But from a pure talent perspective, you never know. You just never know.
So are you I personally right now am fully of the mind that the Packers are only keeping 5 receivers. And, we've seen them keep as few as 5, as many as 7. But given, the numbers they'll need to commit to tight end, I can see them keeping 4 or 5 running backs this season, maybe an extra offensive lineman that they normally wouldn't, given, kind of the COVID situation. Do you still think that the Packers are looking at 5 receivers, or do you think that maybe one of these players will push for a 6th spot?
I can't see them keeping more than 5. I think they'll probably sneak some of those new guys onto the practice squad, since it's an expanded practice squad this season. So we can, and it sounds like with all the free agent pickups and stuff, the likelihood of someone taking someone off the practice squad is lower than normal. But I can't see them having more than 5, especially because we've got 2 backs that are also pass catching backs. Maybe AJ Dillon will be a 3rd. Then we have, we think Jay Sternberger is going to be kind of that move pass catching. Oh my God, I can't speak today. Tight end. So it's not like we have any deficit in the pass catching game. It's just everyone's so focused on the wide receivers that they're not the only ones that are going to be catching balls.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's kind of been an emphasis in Matt LaFleur's offense. You look at who he had with the Titans, and Dion Lewis was kind of known for being a pass-catching back. You had Derrick Henry as bell cow that would, be the bruiser in the backfield, and then you had a guy like Dion Lewis who is shifty and could catch the ball in a variety of ways. Yeah, so I think that Aaron Jones gives them opportunities to do that. Maybe he'll have more rushing or more passing touchdowns and less rushing touchdowns. In 2020 now, I don't know if he'll be able to repeat 23. It would be pretty amazing if he did, but Jamal Williams will have a ton of opportunities in the passing game.
Yeah.
And I'm really curious to see kind of that part of AJ Dillon's game evolve, right? Because he wasn't asked to do it in college, and it's not that he can't do it. It's just that it wasn't the Boston College scheme. So to be able to kind of see what his hands look like and how he fits into that backfield as well, I think that there's a lot to like. And, a shifty guy like Tyler Ervin, who we joke that he's there for jet sweeps and returning kickoffs, but, he'll have opportunities. So I think that we talk about this occasionally on Packs, what she said, but just the idea of being multiple and versatile. And I think that that's really the entire emphasis of this Matt LaFleur offense, whether it's the tight end unit, the backfield, whoever the wide receivers are, they can all do very different things.
I'm starting to feel too that AJ Dillon was not taken. I think a lot of guys are taken in the draft for what they're taken for their potential, what they've produced on the field and what our team thinks that they can reach once they get into the locker room. And I feel like AJ Dillon, just based off of a lot of the things that he's said about how he's improving his route running and his pass catching game, I think we're going to see more of that from him. And I don't know if the expectation is there because no one's asked it. Maybe if someone on those Zoom calls wants to ask this question for me, I'm curious if they're planning use him in that way.
Or instead of having somebody ask the questions, they could just give us press credentials.
Yeah, I'm down. I'm fine with that. Yeah, let's do it.
Should we take questions? Because we have some questions in the chat.
Sure.
All right. So we have, how do you guys feel about the offensive line? So I'll let you go first, and then because I'm curious to see if we always agree on everything. So,
how do I feel about it?
Yeah.
I think that we have one of the best tackles in the league. So we're always set when we have Bach on the field. I think I talked about this a little bit on Pack-A-Day last night or today. It came out also that we feel like, depending on the health of players, John Runyon could see the field this season, probably in that like left guard interior offensive lineman spot. And that would be great if one of the three that we took in the 6th round actually sees the field. But I think we have a really strong line. Obviously we lost Bulaga, which was a tough pill to swallow. Rick Wagner will be solid. I think it seems like from the pressers that everyone speaks pretty highly of him. So I like that we've included 4 of the 5 starters, and so the cohesion from last season will be there.
Yeah, I really liked, it was a Nagler question, but Rick Wagner actually was in Baltimore at the same time that Zadarius Smith was there. So it was really fun to kind of hear him talking about, just the way that they've seen him grow as a player, and, he's happy that they're on the same team. Obviously now it doesn't have to go up against his bull rush, but
I could not imagine.
Yeah.
I could
Just imagine. Just imagine though.
It's horrible. Horrible.
Yeah. And so I think Rick Wagner starts the season as the right tackle. I think that Billy Turner and Lane Taylor are honestly going to be in a pretty tight camp battle for that right guard spot. I think that the Packers' willingness to bring back Lane Taylor and his willingness to come back on a restructured contract indicates kind of their mutual interest in one another. Yeah. I think Lane Taylor wants to stay in Green Bay. We know that the left side is kind of locked down, unless Elton Jenkins is like, hey, I really prefer to play on the right side of the line. Like, unless there's like some freak situation, that left side is taken care of. So I think that Lane Taylor and Billy Turner will be fighting for that spot. But I do also think that whatever happens between Billy Turner and Rick Wagner, whoever does not get a starting job likely becomes your swing tackle. So I talked about this a little bit with Nagler just a couple hours ago, that, Packers fans have been clamoring for, maybe Jared Valdir to come back to shore up that swing tackle.
I was just going to ask what your thoughts were about that.
I think they already have him on the roster. I think that, it's either Rick Wagner or Billy Turner. I don't think you need an additional roster spot committed to that swing tackle unless things get absolutely bananas. And then I think we have bigger problems than the swing tackle at that point.
There are 10 or 11 offensive linemen in camp right now. So I think we have the bodies. I don't think we need to bring in anybody else. I feel very similarly about that. And like I said, maybe it'll be John Runyon Jr. I don't know.
All right. I'm going to let you take this one because I know exactly how you feel about Kevin King.
I want to keep him and Jair together. I know I really, my dad is super anti Kevin King. He's just like one of those.
Mr. Goldstein.
I know. We fight about it. We do. Mainly because he sees, all he thinks about and sees is all that Kevin has blown and not all that Kevin does, and how many games he saved last season and how good he is with like spotting and catching the ball with his hands. I just think him and Jair as like that duo is just, they're really complimentary. And Jair even said it today in his presser. He had only good things to say about his teammates, right? And he just said that, him and Kev were in touch this offseason and like working out and kind of talking about how they were handling the offseason, and that he feels like really comfortable in Kevin's abilities playing on the other side of the field against him. And that he views it as offenses really need to figure out and decide just which side they're willing to take a gamble on and throw it to. Because at this point, he feels like both of them lock it down pretty hard. So Jair said it. I just agree.
Yeah, and first, if you don't listen to Pax, what she said, what is wrong with you? You should start. But second, Perri and I, our last couple episodes have been all about, the cornerbacks. Then we talked about the safeties. And we talk about how, Perri said that Jair and Kevin are very complimentary, but the safeties and the corners are also really complimentary, right? So you finally have some cohesion in your secondary where you have two starters on the boundary. You had Tremont locking up the slot for most of the season. You have Adrian Amos and Darnell Savage. I know Savage missed a couple games due to injury, but there's finally a core group of four that are playing together and working well and really kind of, feeding off of each other. If it's zone coverage, guys like Kevin and Jair can trust that their players are getting passed off effectively. And we look back at, the 2016 championship game, or if you want to talk about HaHa Clinton-Dix, Kentrell Bryce, kind of the revolving door that was safety the last couple seasons with Ibrahim Campbell, Eddie Pleasant, Jermaine Whitehead. And just now that they finally have like this stable secondary, it would kind of be a shame to think about what that looks like. And I know it's starting over at one position and not three. So really, if a guy like Kadar Holman really impresses, that might make your decision a little bit easier. But it is hard to think about the productivity that he brought in 2019 and what that might look like if he's not there in 2021.
Yeah, I think we finally found, like you said, like a base defense that works really well together. And for me to shake that up after how solid they were last season, like I have a hard time. I just have a hard time with that because we know what it's like to have really abysmal cornerback play and safety play back there and how it's literally lost us games. So I think especially in Rodgers' sort of older years, if we're really going to chase that ring with him, like our defense needs to be as locked down as humanly possible because that's the reason we've lost games in the past.
Okay, so this one I'm ready for, right? So I don't know if we'll agree or disagree on this, but I'm genuinely curious for your thought process here. You can only sign one. Do you bring back Kevin King or do you bring back Aaron Jones? And I know you're like a huge fan of both of them. They're like two of your favorites. So.
I'd say Kevin only because running backs are much easier to come by than a corner, like a solid cornerback. So that's my only thing. I mean, I'm not saying that I don't want them to sign Aaron Jones. I do. I absolutely adore him. But I just think based off of how easy / difficult it is to find a solid player at each of their positions, quarterback is much more difficult.
Yeah, I'm with you. And it sucks. Like, these guys have like become just staples in the Green Bay community. They're like faces of the franchise at this point. But I think, when you have young guys that are really kind of locking it down at their respective positions, you look at a guy like Phillip Lindsay in Denver and those undrafted running backs and what they can do in the league. Aaron Jones himself is a 5th-round pick.
Yeah.
You can have a Jonathan Taylor who's a 2nd-rounder. You can have a Saquon Barkley who is a 1st-rounder. And those players, we think that Jonathan Taylor is going to have a really nice career in the NFL. But, you don't necessarily need to reach for players saying this, as we drafted A.J. Dillon in the 2nd round. But I think that, the cornerback position is definitely the more hot commodity from that standpoint, as sad as it would be to see Aaron Jones leave Green Bay.
Horrible. It would be horrible. But I also think that, like, our depth at corner, like, makes me a little bit more nervous than our depth at running back.
Yeah.
And just like you said, like, the ability to kind of go out and find someone who can fill that role. Like, we have some pretty unproven guys there. I mean, Chandon Sullivan, I think, is the only one that we can say in his limited snaps from last season, we feel pretty confident in his, him being able to take that leap. But that doesn't mean he's about to be a starting cornerback in our base defense. He's going to come in nickel and dime packages. So, like, Josh Jackson hasn't been able to see the field. We just took Kadar Holman. We don't know. So, I mean, obviously they know much better than we do what the depth looks like there and how confident they are in those depth guys. But you can't replace someone like Kevin as easily.
Okay. So next I want to talk about Raven Green because I love Raven Green. I love him. If you listen to Facts What She Said, he was the player that I was not the most excited about, but one of the guys on defense that I'm really looking forward to seeing. Perri and I talk almost ad nauseum about how much Mike Pettin plays dime. We all know that Mike Pettin plays a ton of dime defense, and I think that Raven Green is really going to fill in kind of admirably in that spot, whether he comes in kind of opposite Christian Kirksey as, that hybrid inside linebacker. I think that one of his strengths is being physical at the line.
Yeah.
I think he can really improve the run defense because that was kind of an area where Darnell Savage struggled. It just wasn't necessarily his forte. He can do it, but I think if you let him kind of roam in the secondary as your free safety, that's your best bet. So to have Raven Green there as kind of that thumper, and then you let Adrian Amos play that support role kind of in the middle of the defense. I really like the way that those three, I think that there's a lot of promise there. And I think that the Packers are still really high on him, whether it's primarily for his special team snaps. I think that he'll get a lot of opportunities to play kind of a more prominent role in the Packers defense.
We wouldn't have kept him this long if we didn't feel like he fit somewhere in what Pettine wants to do. I don't know what round he was taken or if he was even drafted, but you don't keep someone like him around this long if you don't feel like he has a specific purpose here. But I agree. I think, that second inside linebacker is definitely a big question mark, especially, with some of the depth that we have personally. I don't know who's going to fill that role. I think it could be Raven Green. And since, like you said, Pettine plays so much dime, if you can get someone in there that can fill more of that linebacker, stuff the box role, then we trust the safeties and the cornerbacks we have more in the secondary. I think Raven Green just fits in there. He's the only one I can envision kind of jumping into that space. And I know that Adrian Amos it was one of the best safeties in the box actually last season. Fun fact. So we have some room to sort of circle some people around, but I'm super excited for him. And I think to answer this question, yes, definitely, if he stays healthy.
We got a lot of safety questions today, which maybe we did this to ourselves by talking about it on the podcast last week. But thoughts on Vernon Scott. So he does have a very limited repertoire. Also, Duke is one of my good friends on Packers Twitter. He was a follower of mine long before I even joined She Said TV. So shout out to Duke. He's a really good guy. But yeah, I think Vernon Scott, I really like his size. He's 6'2". None of the other corners or the other safeties are over 6 feet. So I think that he kind of brings this unique size and speed combo. He'd be really good in the nickel. I think he's kind of that hybrid corner safety where he can kind of float around the secondary. I don't know if they'll ask him to play as much in the box, but yeah there's not a lot of film on him. He was only a 1-year starter. He was kind of overshadowed by some of the other guys on the defense who got drafted, obviously, in the first and second rounds. But, I think there's a lot of promise there. And I'm really curious to see. We kind of argued about this, whether or not the Packers would end up with 4 safeties or 5 on the final 53. Yeah, we lovingly fought and then agreed at the end. So, but I think that it'll come down to whether the Packers see enough upside in Vernon Scott or if they want to kind of take a gamble on Will Redmond, who, was a former third-round draft pick, and kind of see if they can stash Vernon Scott on the practice squad. I don't know. What are your thoughts, Perri? Do you think they keep 5?
I think it's possible. I just think given how much we play with 6 DBs on the field, it wouldn't shock me if we kept more than years prior. But I don't know. Vernon's, we've talked about this too, right? Vernon's our rookie. We kind of have our top 2 safeties set in stone already. It's not like guys are sort of vying for that starting role. It's just vying for that depth role. And you interviewed Ty Summers, who was his teammate, who said, I think the best way for him to sort of, rise up on that depth chart is through special teams. So I imagine if he has a role this season, it's going to be mainly special teams.
Yeah, we have so many questions. This is really, we've never had this many questions. I really like it.
Well, someone just said that Raven was an undrafted free agent. So
yeah, from James Madison.
Feeling. So Thank you. That is helpful. Before we go to Tyler's question, I have to say, I don't follow other teams enough to know who their undrafted free agents are. But I personally feel like the Packers do a very, very good job of picking up guys who actually contribute from the undrafted list. I don't know if that's I would love to see what the stats are on that. But I feel like even historically, Tremont was undrafted.
I was going to say your guy, Tremont.
We have some serious players who we saw, as prospects and decided to bring them in who have shown. So I don't know. Good job, Packers scouts. Okay. Thumbs up for you. Oh God, that's going to get memed. All right, Tyler, Josh Jackson, does he stick around in special teams or is this all or nothing for him at corner? I really think it's all or nothing for him at corner this year. It's just he was a second round pick. The expectations have to be higher. It doesn't matter how much he contributes to special teams. You don't draft someone in the second round to be a special teams player. And whether it's scheme fit or just it's not clicking or it was a busted pick, as bad as that sounds, like this is the year. He was drafted with Jair, and look at the development difference.
Yeah, and I think, Josh Jackson didn't help himself when he got injured, and obviously that wasn't like his fault. He didn't want to get injured, but he kind of dropped down to the very bottom of the depth chart. And then it was hard to climb his way out because Chandon Sullivan looked so good. Kadar Holden looked really good in training camp. So He was just kind of like fighting for opportunities. And then they had Tremont Williams, who's like an Iron Man who didn't miss snaps. So there were just no opportunities for the young guys. And, Perri and I argued again about whether or not you bring back a guy like Tremont Williams. And the argument that I made is that you don't, because you need to see what these young guys can do, especially with Kevin King in contract year. So if Josh Jackson proves himself, if Kadar Holman proves himself, then you probably don't re-sign Kevin King, as hard as that is to say. But, if you are looking at the back half of your depth chart and you're like, ooh, then you bring Kevin King back, right? So, yeah. I think that's kind of the telltale sign.
But does Josh Jackson's skill set, he feels like he has different skills than Kevin does. I don't know. I don't see him fitting. Like, I don't see him being a replacement. Like, maybe someone else on the depth chart does. But I don't know. All I can think about when I think of Josh Jackson is that crazy one-handed interception that he had at Iowa, and that, like, the potential is so there. And we've said this before, and I don't know if we've said it here on the podcast, but I find that Pettine a lot of times talks about how he takes players and he wants to fit players into a scheme based off what they're naturally good at, and not so much fitting them into that box of I'm like they're this position, but just like what are they talented at, and that he just hasn't been able to do that with Josh Jackson yet. So I don't know if it's just time, or I know that Goot today actually was like, Josh was nursing the injuries the past 2 seasons. So I don't know what it is, but Tyler, it's definitely a make or break year for the man.
Isn't it interesting too to think about, like, during the 2018 NFL draft, I was in Wausau visiting my family. My family that I was visiting had like no interest in the draft, but I was like, no, I have to watch this. I have to see who the Packers take. And for the entire weekend, my uncle would not leave the TV. Like, he would just get updates from me on every pick. We watched it together.
Nice.
We went to a cousin's house, and like, it's so weird to talk about like going to people's houses and the, the Rona age now.
Remember when we used to do that?
Remember when we could do that? But I remember so desperately wanting Harold Landry. And the fact that, then you think about, had the Packers gotten Harold Landry, we probably wouldn't have Za'Darius Smith, who's the light of my life. So
everything happens for a reason.
Just the dominoes that kind of fall into place depending on where players go in the draft, and always having a draft crush, even though I still love Ross Blacklock, and I think that he would have looked really good in green and gold. So whatever. Yeah. But
all right, Maggie, favorite undrafted free agent this year?
That's hard. I really have been following Chris Barnes a lot on.
That is not what I thought you were going to say.
I have one for offense and one for defense. So I'm starting with defense.
Okay.
So you threw me off.
Sorry. I'm sorry. You're following Chris Barnes.
Yeah. So I really enjoy, and it's interesting that he has a relationship already with Jordan Love. I think that inside linebacker is one of those positions where there's a lot of opportunity. I think that he could kind of stick. I feel like he would take on the role that Ty Summers had last season, right? So I think Ty is going to get more looks on defense. And I think Chris Barnes could kind of be the guy that starts on special teams, and depending on how he plays throughout the season, could see some looks on defense. And then on offense, it's Patrick Taylor, the running back.
That's who I thought you were going to say.
Yeah, because Lance Zierlein from NFL Network described him as a superhero, like a comic book hero. That's the way that this man is built. So just like the thought of, a superhero in the Packers backfield, and he's just another dynamic player. And I think that he's kind of like that hybrid running back fullback almost, where he's just a big dude. And I think that the Packers could use some more of that, especially at Lambeau in the winter. So those are my two, Perri. Who are yours?
I don't have two. I just have one. Darrell Stewart. Super pumped about him. Yeah, I think The only thing about him that I think might be a detriment to him is his hands. He suffered a little bit from drops in college, and I think maybe that's why he wasn't drafted. But truly, I think he's a pretty complete player. And from a position of need, I think he maybe could come in and surprise people. I know people are really high on Reggie Bentleton too. I think the jump from the CFL to the NFL is going to be an interesting one. If he's successful, he's just going to have to be that much better than everyone else. But yeah, Darryl Stewart, man, super pumped about it.
Well, and Reggie Bentleton is so interesting because he looks so good in the CFL, right? Like he almost looks like a man among boys. And then you're like,
but that's how you should be if you're coming from the CFL. Like that's my thing, is that you should be dominating them if you're expected to make the jump to the NFL.
Yeah. So now I want to see what he looks like. And this is like every year I really look forward to the preseason. And I know that most people think that it's just a waste of time, but this is where I'm like, okay, can you hang with, the starters or even the third string guys? Like if you're getting pushed around by guys who likely will be on the practice squad or not on a roster at all, probably not meant to play in the NFL. So the preseason gives you like a really good gauge, and it kind of tells you how the team is feeling about somebody. If like when Curtis Bolton was taking snaps with the first team over Ty Summers, you were like, okay, we know kind of how they feel about him at this point during the training camp process.
And that's the difference between not having media at practices now, because you don't get those like little snippets of information that say like, oh, that's interesting, or, oh, I wonder what that means. And like, it's probably, like a little hit or miss with maybe we over analyze and overthink some things, but like that information's useful. I was super excited about preseason also because I wanted to see Jordan Love.
Yeah, I think that was like the big storyline, right? And it was not necessarily like what does he look like on the field, but you wanted to see him get all those developmental reps. Like if Tim Boyle was starting the whole preseason, it's like, well, what's the point? Like, and no disrespect to Tim Boyle, because I think that this season specifically, he probably starts as QB2, and they're going to keep 3 quarterbacks. But any other season, you would expect Jordan Love to play like almost every snap, and then Rodgers maybe comes in for a series if he needs to like loosen his shoulder. So
just like get one series. It's always one
if
series.
If the stretching doesn't do enough, you just gotta sling the ball around a little bit.
Sling them around on the other teams like last string guys. Just get that confidence rising. Not that he needs it. I think too, like we talked about this yesterday with Pack-A-Day with Alex and Andy. Like I think our depth at the quarterback position is a really interesting advantage for us this season that we kind of fell into. Like they obviously didn't pick Jordan Love because of like all the COVID stuff. They picked him because they think he can be a starting quarterback. But then we have someone like Tim Boyle, who's not a bad backup by any means, knows the playbook, knows what he's doing, is comfortable. Like, I think it's not the worst thing in the world that we have 3 guys that if any of them, well, Aaron obviously, but 2 guys, if any of them trotted out there, I wouldn't be like clutching my stomach like this is the end.
Clutching your pearls.
Clutching my pearls. This is the end. So
the thing about Tim Boyle, and like maybe this is a weird thing to say, I don't know, but he to me very much feels like he could be the next Josh McCown. Like I don't know if he'll ever be like a full-time starter.
Wait, I love that comparison.
On an NFL roster, but I feel like he's going to have a long career as a journeyman quarterback because I think that he's got a high football IQ. I think that he will prove himself in the league as kind of, just a really reliable backup.
He's got a rocket of an arm.
And if he needs to play, then, you trust him for a couple games, but it's not like he's going to take over a franchise. And I think that, to me, that's my comp for Tim Boyle is Josh McCown.
I love that for him. I really do. I think that's spot on. All right. Is this year a make or break year for Pettine?
Yes. And I know that there were a lot of voices wondering, and I may have been among them. I don't know. You can pull up my receipts, but wondering what would happen with Mike Pettine after the NFC Championship game. And I think that while the really hard part about the NFC Championship game is that it is amplified on the biggest possible stage. Yeah. So if this game happened in week 5, we would never talk about it again. But it cost the team a Super Bowl, so you obviously have to talk about it.
It cost them the chance to go to the Super Bowl.
They were going to win.
against the Chiefs. All right, I love the Packers.
Stop.
Like, come on.
I'm just saying they could have gone to the Super Bowl. Then we'd be talking about Aaron Rodgers and his quest for a second ring, and I think it's a make or break year for Mike Pettin, but I also think that he is still kind of coming into his own with the pieces that he's got. So 2019, he got Amos, Smith, and then he showed everybody what he could do with those guys, leading, putting up some of the best pressure numbers in the league without actually, blitzing most of the time. So, there's a lot to like there, and I think that he's still kind of developing. He didn't get a ton of help in the draft or in free agency this season. I mean,
it's going to be about what he does with the scheme.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah. And someone in the comments here was like, adjust mid-game, and I just completely agree with that. It's like, is our game plan working? Yes or no? If no, what are we going to do to change it? And I think that was one of the things when we were down last season. We were down and we weren't coming back, and it was just downhill, where I feel like we need to be able to come back in and make those like little adjustments and say like, okay, this is how we're going to now beat this team or come back from a deficit.
Okay. So let's talk about somebody else then in the 2019 draft class. I really like this. I mean, I know you are the conductor of so many hype trains.
No, I'm not. No, I'm not.
EQ, Jamon Williams, Kevin King, Jair Alexander, Adrian Amos now.
No, I just have confidence in our players. But we've been talking about Jay Sternberger since last season. We were talking about Jay Sternberger. The first thing Maggie and I bonded over was how pumped we were for Jay Sternberger back in like January. I have the receipts.
Everybody watching this, Perri and I have only known each other since January. You would think that we
wild.
I know.
Grew up together.
This is the life that we live now.
Well, I mean, I just like sit around all day and talk to you.
What else are we gonna do?
Okay, what are your expectations for Jay Sternberger?
And I think like Jace to me is another one of the players where it's like, why didn't the Packers take a wide receiver? Because you're and I know that the key word here is hope, right? Like you're hoping for significant development from these guys. But Jay Sternberger is about to be tight end 1, right? Like Jimmy Graham is not over him anymore on the depth chart. Mercedes Lewis is not going to be tight end 1. He's kind of going to serve that supplementary role, and that's what he's best at. Like I think he didn't re-sign with the team so that he could get 15 touchdowns and 1,000 yards. Like he just wanted to compete and he wanted to play with Aaron Rodgers, and we get that, and that's fair. So, I think Josiah DeGuara will come in, and Jace will be a guy for him to develop under. I think they're both going to kind of learn this together, and they could be a really impactful 1-2 punch for quite a while. But I think the roles that they're going to play are so different. Like, Josiah DeGuara will kind of be that support role, whether he lines up in the H-back, occasionally takes some snaps in the slot. But Jace is going to be the guy. I mean, the Packers are hoping that Jace can kind of fill in. Nagler asked, about this with Matt LaFleur in the presser about how do you attack the middle of the field, and I think the answer is with Jay Sternberger.
Jay Sternberger, yeah. I think he is such an exciting player. I think he's the best tight end from that draft class. I know that there were guys taken ahead of him, but I really, really, really like what he's shown. And I hate putting like unrealistic expectations on players, like hyping them up to a point where we're disappointed, but it's just really hard not to feel like something special with him. It's just, he's got the mindset for it, the confidence for it. He showed it when he was on the field last season. Like we only had him. I mean, he scored a touchdown in the NFC Championship game. That was his first NFL touchdown ever under that pressure. It was a scramble touchdown. Being able to follow what Aaron Rodgers is doing, like he's only played 3 games with him. It's under the big lights. I think there's something about him. It just clicks, and he feels like the kind of guy who's going to excel under pressure. Yeah, and I think that it's going to be really interesting to track his career with Noah Fant and TJ Hawkinson because Packers fans were so adamant about needing a tight end really early. And, I can remember being on the Pack-A-Day live show last season when Jay Sternberger got picked. And Packers fans were excited about it because, yes, the Packers had drafted other tight ends, and Richard Rodgers was one of them. And I adore Richard Rodgers more than probably most people in the earth. But
they've just been missing a key tight end, and they tried and they tried. Jared Cook maybe could have been the guy if he got a couple more seasons, because he didn't really come on until the very end of that season, and we remember him for the divisional round against the Cowboys, but that was like the very peak of what he was doing with Green Bay, and it felt like a little bit too little. Little too late.
I think that Jace is going to be a much more consistent piece of this offense, and it sounds like every time the question's posed, Matt and Goot both talk so highly of him and just have said like bluntly, like he is a big piece of what we're trying to do here this season. And like we've seen what this team is like with a dominant tight end with Jermichael Finley. And I know it's way too early to say that Jace is going to be that dominant because he just hasn't been on the field enough, but it feels like that's where this is heading. And I think Aaron with a piece like that, like attacking the middle of the field, like you said, it's going to be stupid nasty. It's just like
hashtag stupid nasty 2020.
I mean, I think about if we have dominant players at each of the key offensive pieces, like we have Devontae Adams, Jay Sternberger turns out to be a playmaker, and then Aaron Jones with David Bakhtiari and Elton Jenkins and Rodgers under center. I mean, please ask me how you stop that. I want to know. Robert Saleh, we coming for ya.
I can't. I don't know where to go from here.
Cut it. We're done.
But I mean, really, if you think about like Aaron Rodgers with a player like Travis Kelce or Zach Ertz or George Kittle, like that's what's been missing from this offense for so long. And we were excited about Jimmy Graham, and he had that potential. He was a player that Aaron Rodgers still looked to, still threw to, but it just wasn't opening up the middle of the field enough.
Jimmy Graham can't run. Like if Jimmy Graham could still do yards after catch, it may be a different story. But that's what Jace can do. I genuinely have gone back and watched a good amount of his stuff from college. Like that boy, the whole offense was built around Jay Sternberger. The entire offense was Jay Sternberger. Like he was everything. He was tight end. He blocked. He was wide receiver 1. Like he was everything. And so, yeah, obviously it's not going to have to be the case now. He's on a team with a lot more moving pieces. But just like we just talked about with Reggie Bentleton, when you're that dominant against the rest of your opponents, like there's something there. And I think it's going to translate. I just think there's something about, and we see this with Jair, and we talk about that like swag and that confidence in yourself to not get like all in your head on the big stage. Like Jace has that.
Yeah. And I go back to like,
does that answer the question?
Just a little. I mean, if you could clarify, I was just kind of confused. Mm-hmm. Okay. So who are you most worried about not meeting expectations? I think that this is a really interesting question.
Like immediately this season or in general?
Let's say this season. So who we're projecting our expectations onto going into the season? Because there's a lot of players that have make or break years.
Kevin.
You think
Kevin
so?
King. Yeah. Yeah. Just because he had such a good showing last season. And I think because it's a contract year, all eyes are going to be on him. And of all the other guys on contract years, I'm not as worried about them. Like Kenny's going to do Kenny, and Aaron Jones is going to go out there and do his thing. And I worry a little bit about Kevin.
Kenny's going to do Kenny. Should be on a shirt.
Kenny.
I mean, I kind of took this in a different direction, right? Like you went for the guy who's entering free agency. I went for draft picks. So there's so many like Oren Burks, but Oren Burks, we don't really have expectations, right? Like we think he's going to take a jump, but we haven't seen enough to project expectations onto him. So I think for me, it would either be Jace, because you saw how long we talked about him and what we think he can do for the offense. So if he doesn't live up to that, and Rashawn Gary probably, but to be fair, if it's a second season and Rashawn Gary isn't exceeding expectations, it's probably because he's third on the depth chart behind the Super Smith Bros.
I was just going to say that. In watching, I feel like outside linebacker is one of those positions where it just takes some time to get to that level. And he, like you said, is playing behind Z and P. And it's one of those things where, like, when they're that dominant and Kenny's that dominant, are you going to have 4 guys that are smashing through the line? Like, probably not. So someone said Billy Turner. That's fair. That's actually not a bad pick.
And if he doesn't, that's why they have Lane Taylor, right? Like, I mean, the Billy Turner contract is expensive, but I also think that the Packers have kind of given themselves an out by drafting the way that they did and keeping Lane Taylor. I think another player that kind of, you'd worry about with the expectations is Kingsley Keke, because the Packers have not really added much to that defensive line. And, Kenny Clark basically said, like, help is not on the way. Like, we have to be like, we have to do it all, especially if we know Mike Pettin plays so much time. That's 6 guys on the field dedicated to the secondary. You need your front 5 then at that point to step up. And we've talked about this before, him saying that they're filling multiple gaps. And you have to hope. I mean, Kingsley Keke is basically second on the depth chart at this point to me as somebody that you would expect to kind of take a leap. And you do have Dean Lowry, even though he's not necessarily an every down player. You have Tyler Lancaster as your more traditional nose. Montravius Adams is another player you could kind of throw into that role. But I think that expectations are really high for Kingsley Keke. And if that doesn't line up, then Packers fans are going to be clamoring for a guy like Snacks a couple games into the season if the run defense is still suspect.
What do you think about this?
Todd. I think it's fair. But I think he'll meet expectations.
I agree.
But whose expectations is he meeting? And what are the expectations?
Honestly, fuck all the expectations. He's Aaron Rodgers. Like, I don't know, like, look. God, I have such a hard time with this because
get on your soapbox. It's fine.
No, it's not a soapbox. It's a contradiction of how I feel and how, like, my realistic side and my emotion side. Whereas like Aaron has proven that he is one of the best players to ever do it. Period. He's a first ballot Hall of Famer. He has done and broken so many records. He's won a ring. We want him to win a ring so badly again. He deserves it. He deserves to be in that category of having multiple, but we can't lie to ourselves. He's going to be 37 years old. Like, he's had 2 collarbone breaks and a number of concussions. He ripped his knee up a few seasons ago and played through it. It's just like, at one point, does that catch up to you? At what point is it he's just not the same guy anymore, and that's nobody's fault? It's just age. We're not all Tom Brady. We can't be Iron Man with our chef that tells us what to eat to make our bodies stay perfect until we're 45 million years old. Like, it's just it's just one of those things. So my hope in this scenario is that, and I think that they're doing this by drafting guys like AJ Dillon, is doing what you can to put the pieces around Aaron Rodgers so that he doesn't have to be Superman, and they can scheme to play to his strengths, and we can still win games because he's still better than 90% of the quarterbacks out there.
Right, because you know what the Packers did by not drafting a wide receiver? They proved that their offense does not have to live or die anymore by the arm of Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, and it shouldn't, because I don't know that he can do that anymore.
He's going to damn try because he's Aaron Rodgers. But,
I mean, he's going to have a fire under his ass this season, and nobody watch the fuck out, because spiteful Aaron Rodgers is really something that I can't wait to see.
Also, swearing Perry is my favorite.
Sorry.
That should be a shirt. That should be a shirt. Swearing Perry. Mr. Goldstein, you gave us hot takes earlier, so Perry's going to swear. It's fine.
I mean, I won't go there. You wonder where I got it from. So,
ooh, the family.
Why? What do you think about QB1?
I think he's got some really good seasons left in him, and I think that this free agency period has been so bizarre from the standpoint of Tom Brady going to the Buccaneers and Phillip Rivers going to the Colts and Cam Newton going to the Patriots. And we did like this square dance of quarterbacks going away from, their where they have left a legacy. And we've kind of talked about this before, that's becoming the expectation. It's the norm at this point. A guy like Drew Brees is kind of the exception, where if he retires after a season or two and he stays with the Saints, it is what it is. That's he's lucky to be able to do that. And I think Brett Favre, as much flack as he got because he intentionally went to a division rival,
he kind of paved the way.
Yeah,
he made it a norm.
It is now a norm. And, I think if you ask Patriots fans, and I don't know, because I try really hard not to talk to Patriots fans, I don't think there's ill will there, because they're like, yeah, he's going to go get his. And I think the ill will started when, Gronk unretired to come play for the Bucs. But there is this expectation now that players are not going to finish where they started. And we talked about how emotional it was for Patrick Mahomes to get a 10-year deal in Kansas City, because Chiefs fans, they just won the Super Bowl, and now they have their guy locked down for 10 years, and that's exciting. And we're kind of now on the tail end of what it feels like. This is Aaron Rodgers' 16th season, right? I was 11 when Aaron Rodgers started playing football.
I was going to say, I was 9. So when, I got a comment recently, that I had said, Aaron Rodgers is my childhood hero. Well, I was 9 when he was drafted. So he was my childhood hero, and he's the reason why Maggie and I love football. So it's just harder to talk about a decline of someone that you just admire as much as you admire him. But, he could come out here and prove us all wrong, and I hope that that's the case. So,
Aaron Rodgers, if you're watching this, we love you. Come on Happy Hour. If you're spending your Monday night watching Happy Hour, come on the show. We would love to have you.
Bring your scotch. I can do 4 fingers of tequila.
I can also do 4 fingers of tequila. Wow.
How about we do 1 or 2 more questions?
All right, I'm good with this. How about this? This is interesting. Surprise cuts.
You go first. You go first.
All right. It's hard because, a lot of these guys are tied into the cap, right? Big B, don't get mad. Jamal Williams, we talked. Perri, don't spit. Big B, sorry. Jamal Williams could theoretically, we thought that he might be trade bait at one point. Lane Taylor, we thought, was going to be the original surprise cut, and then he restructured his contract. It's hard though, because if this was any other season, you could even throw out a Corey Linsley, right? But because it's the pandemic and we have bubble rosters and guys aren't able to travel and kind of audition for other teams, there's no preseason, it feels less and less likely we're going to get these surprises, because you kind of have to hold on to all of your pieces. We've said before that the healthiest roster likely wins, or you make the deepest push because you have your whole roster available to you. So I think that thanks, Todd. I think that I don't necessarily see there being any surprise cuts this season, but if it were a traditional season, Corey Linsley might be on that list, given maybe they need to free up his cap space, knowing that he's a free agent next season, to re-sign a guy like Kenny Clark or David Bakhtiari, because the cap is going to look different now, trying to re-sign. And we've talked again, ad nauseum, about how there's so many different free agents, and this is such a masterful class, and it really is, but you can't pay everyone. So I think that he would, in a traditional season, be my surprise cut. I don't see it being an MVS, I guess, at this point. And I don't really know if that would be a surprise anyway.
My surprise cut, and I'm sticking by this, I don't know if it's that big of a surprise, but is Montravius Adams. But that's not really a surprise, I think. Oh, is that your friend? Hey, Justin.
Justin lives in my house, basically.
What's
Hi,
up?
Justin.
Thanks for joining. Oh, man.
I don't like this. I don't like that they found me.
How many wins for the season? All right, this can be our last one. I think we're going 11-5.
Ooh. Who are your losses then? Let's see if we compare.
Oh, I need to pull up the schedule. Saints at home.
Okay.
Possibly Bucks at home.
Okay.
Potentially one of the Vikings games.
Perry, gross. Just kidding. I agree though. Like it's bound to happen.
49ers. Sorry. I'm like, I don't even want to say it. I don't even want to like speak it into existence.
Don't put it in the universe.
And okay, maybe I'm changing my mind. Maybe we're going 12-4. I think there just might be a surprise loss, like the Colts,
like the Chiefs in 2011.
Yeah, sure. But you know what I mean? Like one of those where it's just like, wait, what? Like the Chargers last season. It was sort of like a wait, what? So like the Colts could be, or like the Panthers sneaky, something like that. But
I mean, 11-5 feels good to me. I also think 10-6. Like we've talked about this before on a number of different shows, but we do so many shows together now that they just all kind of blur together. It's just Perri and Maggie time, but TM, trademark, Perri and Maggie time. But yeah, I think the Packers, I've said it before, are going to be a better team with a worse record. So I think don't be surprised if they go 10-6. I still think that they'll win the division. I'm pretty confident in that.
Super Bowl after a 10-6 season.
Yeah. So there you go.
Okay, so who do you think they're going to lose to?
I think the Saints are going to be tough at home. Yeah. The Buccaneers, I think it's going to come down to our secondary versus their offense. Tom Brady's fine. I'm not
but
going to.
Their receiving core is.
Right, exactly. Yeah, so, but if Tom Brady dinks and dunks his way down the field, then it's not going to really matter how good Chris Godwin is when he's running 10-yard slant routes. But that's a conversation for another day. So, I think it's the 49ers again, which I don't want to talk about it, but I think it definitely could be the Vikings. I think if they're likely to lose. You and I have talked quite a bit about how the Lions kind of have a sneaky good roster, and the Packers somehow managed to pull out 2 wins despite never leading for a single minute in both those games. So.
And if Stafford's playing to where he was when he got hurt, he was killing it.
He was on pace for like a record-setting season. Yeah. It was phenomenal.
And they've added some really solid players this offseason. So, but again, I just don't trust Matt Patricia. Like that's my only thing. So, all right, we have time for one more question. It's the most important one of the day.
I know exactly what it is.
What is your go-to game day snack?
Are you asking me specifically to answer this first?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I throw a mean ass tailgate party, right? Like everybody comes to my house. Girl, you're always invited.
Yeah, you do.
Everybody comes to my house. My house is the spot. I make pulled pork. I make jalapeno poppers. I make cookies. I make beer cheese dip.
Nice.
I make everything that I can possibly make. I spend my whole day throwing it down, and then I have a lot of alcohol, and sometimes there's videos of me on YouTube or on Twitter running laps when something good happens, and my friends come on to Twitter like once a year to post footage of
embarrassing
me. Yeah.
Of you. Yeah.
So
I'm a buff chick dip girl. I always bring the buffalo chicken dip.
You abbreviate it.
Because that's, I don't know. That's what my friends call it. It's buff chick dip. All right, whatever, guys. It's a New York thing, I guess. I don't know what to tell you.
Buffalo chicken. Is that too many syllables, right? To say buffalo chicken? Okay.
So lazy. So lazy. But yeah, I've done everywhere from like I've made my own like little pigs in a blanket to just like chips and guac. But there's always beer.
I have a friend that calls pigs in a blankets beanie weenies, and I've never heard them call it.
I really hate that. I really, really hate that.
But she brings
so uncomfortable.
She brings the beanie weenies to the tailgate.
Oh my god! All right.
Yes, on that note,
old fashions always. So
that's Justin's girlfriend. Hey Emily, what's up?
So everyone, it was a wave.
Okay.
God, leave me alone. All right, we're gonna go. It's been a great hour. Thank you for joining us for happy hour. As always, I'm Perri. This is Maggie. You can follow us here every week, Monday night, 6 p.m. Lambo time. Packs What She Said once a week. should we actually just give the people the surprise now if they're watching?
Yeah, go for it. You do it.
All right. This week on Packs What She Said, we're going to have Andy Herman joining us. So the great, well-known, lovely, kind Andy Herman from Pack-A-Day Podcast and Packer Report is going to be joining us on the podcast. It's going to be super fun. We have Jamal Williams joining for Lombardi's Bar on Wednesday. So tune into Lombardi's Bar. That's for you, Big B. You probably already know.
You're aware.
You're aware. What else do we got going on? We're part of the Pack-A-Day crew. So every actually I'm not. So you're going back in. No, I'm really not.
Part of the Pack-A-Day crew?
No, I'm talking to Big B and his comment. I'm fully sober at the moment.
Shut up, Big B. Get out of here.
You're back in timeout. We are part of the Pack-A-Day crew. Maggie's every Thursday. I'm now every other Monday. Pack-A-Day now has Ben Fennell joining on the other Mondays, so that's super sweet and exciting. Yeah, GOAT. It's going to be awesome. Him and Andy chatting is going to be like a must listen to. So
absolutely.
You can find us all over the place, but follow me at Perri_Goldstein. Follow Maggie at Maggie J. Loney. Follow the podcast at PWSS Podcast. So many words thrown at me right now.
You're going so fast.
The New York is coming out in me. But regardless, tune in every Monday night. We'll be doing this. We'll be answering questions. We'll be keeping you up to date now that football's finally coming back. Cross your fingers. Wear a mask. We'll see you next week.
Wear a mask. Go Pack-O.
Go Pack-O.